We let too many people in this country that we don't even know who's here.
Thank you all for being here on this difficult day. Yesterday on Thanksgiving Eve at approximately 2:15, near the Farragut West Metro Station, 2 uniformed guardsmen were ambushed in a brazen and targeted attack. The suspect, he has been identified as Ramanullah Lakhanwal, 29-year-old Afghan, who entered the United States under Biden's Operation Allies Welcome following the disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan.
Border Patrol, ICE, all seem to be very busy to me, so you don't think they're moving fast enough?
We need to be running against this threat.
There are over 1,000 Taliban and ISKP operatives in the United States.
Do we have any data to bounce that off of?
Yes, but it's not complete.
The father of suicide bombing.
He's the man issuing 7 million Afghan passports.
7 million.
7 million with the permission granted by the United States State Department.
We're also not treating these passports as compromised, which is insane, right?
Well, you miss all the signs when you do absolutely zero vetting.
What are the updates that you're seeing out from Afghanistan and these terrorist networks?
Well, the resistance is still fighting. The Taliban, Al-Qaeda, ISIS, ISKP, and the rest of the terrorist organizations that are there. The intelligence networks that America helped build in Afghanistan, they're still operational. I'm not talking about the GDI, the Taliban. I'm talking about the ones that are under the control of the resistance.
So the GDI is the Taliban's intelligence service, correct?
Correct. General Directorate of Intelligence. The head of GDI is Abdulhaq Wasiq, a man who was a prisoner at Guantanamo Bay, and America released him, and now he's leading Taliban's intelligence. And so there is other intelligence networks operational in Afghanistan. The most active ones are led by President Saleh, Amrullah Saleh. He runs an organization called Afghanistan Green Trend. And there are many other intelligence networks, but by far the one's most reliable intelligence that I've seen comes from AGT, which is Afghanistan Green Trend. What I've heard and what I've seen, the documents that I've seen shows that, pertaining to America, that there are over 1,000 Taliban and ISKP operatives in the United States. And this 1,000 are not the individuals that were emboldened after the United States abandoned Afghanistan and withdrew. These are not the individuals in the Afghan American community, in the diaspora, or those we brought in, 120,000 that were evacuated. They're not members of those communities who are now sympathetic towards the Taliban. The 1,000 or so that I mentioned, these are deep cover operatives that report to Sirajuddin Haqqani and then the leadership of the Taliban and ISKP.
And where's this intel coming from?
The anti-Taliban resistance.
Who's running that?
There are several resistance fronts. You've met Commander Ahmad Massoud, the leader of the National Resistance Front. There's also President Amrullah Saleh, who's leading Afghanistan Green Trend.
And can you talk about him? That's where I was going with this.
President Saleh?
Yes.
Of course, yes. Well, the man needs no introduction, but I'll do my best. He has been fighting in the resistance one way or another since I think he was 15 or 16 from what I've seen. He did intelligence liaison work under the leadership of Commander Ahmad Shah Massoud, who led the resistance against the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, and then against the Taliban and Al-Qaeda. President Mr. Saleh at that point did liaison work. For him, he led intelligence. And then after the United States went into Afghanistan in 2001, he became the head of Afghanistan's intelligence, the National Directorate of Security.
So that's the Afghan version of the Central Intelligence Agency.
Correct. America helped build it in Afghanistan. The head of that intelligence unit, NDS, was Mr. Saleh. He literally built that NDS in Afghanistan. I don't think there's any American intelligence official that is unfamiliar with Mr. Saleh He was, and I believe he still is, our ally. And so after that, he became the Minister of Interior in Afghanistan. And then after that, he started AGT in 2011, which is Afghanistan Green Trend, which is one of the main political parties in Afghanistan. Grassroots movement, had millions of members inside Afghanistan. In, I believe it was 2019, Mr. Saleh won the elections and became the first vice president of Afghanistan under the Ghani administration. Ashraf Ghani was the president. Mr. Saleh was his vice president. And so on August 15, 2021, when Mr. Ghani, the former president, fled Afghanistan to Dubai and abandoned everything, Mr. Saleh, Vice President Saleh, did not flee Afghanistan. He instead went to Panjshir Valley, which was the only province that had not fallen to the Taliban. And he declared a national resistance against the Taliban. And because Mr. Ghani had fled, according to our Article 60 and 67 of the Constitution of Afghanistan, Mr. Saleh became the acting president of Afghanistan. Mr. Saleh, President Saleh now, his time in office ended in July of 2024, just a few months ago. And so he, being a spy, I think spies never quit. And so he went back to just like Sarah Adams doesn't quit, spies don't quit. He went back to leading intelligence in Afghanistan, and his network is operational in Afghanistan. And I don't think anyone has as much sources under his control as Mr. Saleh in that region.
So that's where a lot of this info's coming from.
Correct. He's correct. Yes. Yes.
And I think it's important to note here too, because a lot of folks, to your question, they're watching this and they're like, okay, well, these are, veterans getting this. Like, why aren't we getting this from the intelligence community, or why aren't we getting this from the formal institutions? And one thing I'll just give as an example, Legend won't talk about it, but, Mr. Saleh was abandoned, just like a whole bunch of other Afghan assets were abandoned on August 15th. We're talking 98 to 99% of the human intelligence assets in Afghanistan that took 20 years to build were left behind. And this is coming from the former CENTCOM commander, right? What happened was a lot of veterans like Legend, who had pre-existing relationships, found ways to do humanitarian outreach in those moments to fill the gap because no one else was picking up the phone. And also had the foresight as an intelligence guy to say, well, it's probably not a good idea to leave Mr. Saleh out there on his own. And so over these last several years, Legend has cultivated a relationship, and really done the job. And I just don't know any other way to say it, right? Done the job of what a formal intelligence agency would normally do with a massive asset like that. So now you've got literally the guy who is regarded as the father of Afghanistan intelligence talking primarily to an Afghan-American Army, U.S. Army NCO. And that's where that primary relationship took place. Now, multiply that, Shawn, at scale. You have Sarah Adams doing her version of that, me doing my version of that with Afghan Special Forces and commandos. And that's what's evolved over the last 4 years, is by the virtue of abandoning 98 to 99% of our intelligence capability and our commandos and our special ops. The veteran community stepped into the breach and took over those relationships for primarily humanitarian reasons. But here we are 4 years later, and what you have is high veracity intelligence and reporting coming through these channels instead of formal channels.
Sir, do you have any updates?
Well, Legend kind of brought up a bit, right? He talked a little bit about Sirajuddin Haqqani and ISKP. I think what a lot of people don't understand is how Al-Qaeda fits into that and why it matters, right? So Al-Qaeda is planning an attack on the U.S. homeland, but who are they using, right, to be involved in that attack? Sirajuddin Haqqani, right? He's the Minister of Interior in Afghanistan. He allows basically the terrorists to come into Afghanistan. His now kind of like cousin runs the refugee services, right? So his name is Hafiz Akani. He was involved in Abbey Gate. He's also involved in the U.S. Homeland plot. He's the one that basically takes our humanitarian dollars and gives it to the foreign jihadists saying, oh, they're refugees coming back into the country, et cetera, right? So there's a whole pipeline of our money going into these foreign fighters enabled by the Haqqanis, okay? Then we have the whole ISKP problem, right? So our counterterrorism dollars goes to the Taliban to fight ISKP. It's a huge farce. We did last month, we did 9 days on Twitter just showing operations the Taliban said they did against ISKP and they weren't, right? There is a joint training camp. You know where we dropped the big, the big mother of all bombs? There is a joint training camp there. It's named after Sirajuddin's father, the Jalaluddin Haqqani Training Center. It has Al-Qaeda terrorists there, ISKP terrorists there, and Haqqani network terrorists there, right? So when we talk about Al-Qaeda's Homeland plot, they're using the Haqqanis to leverage in the plot. They're using ISIS to leverage in the plot. And then, of course, Al-Qaeda's leading the plot. Like, think of how dangerous this is when he says there's 1,000 just under the bucket of ISKP and the Haqqanis, right? Then we talk about all the groups Al-Qaeda is aligned with. How many of those are in the country? Because Al-Qaeda is saying that's another 1,000, right? So these numbers start to get really big when you bring all these groups under one umbrella to fight a common enemy. Us, right? We impacted them. We impacted them in Afghanistan. We impacted them in Iraq, and we impacted them in Syria, which is kind of the most recent open wound, right? And so they want our war fighters who did that in those countries to feel it here. They want you to feel it in your neighborhood, at your home. They don't want you to feel safe where you live now. And that's something we really need to understand and listen to, right? Because I do think, as Scott said, Israel had a little hubris, right? There were reports going in. Israel got information. I saw some of the stuff passed to Israel about the Hamas guys training in Afghanistan. And, you know, they did have some belief something's going to happen. They never thought it was going to be the scale it was. Now, the U.S. government's getting the same type of information. Israel's getting probably a lot more. And they're now like, oh, that's not going to happen here at that level, right? We're not going to see that happen here. And that's very, very dangerous, especially when we're talking about just the numbers that came in illegally. But remember, our State Department has been issuing passports and visas to Haqqani network guys. Plenty of former CIA officers have provided tips to the government over the last 4 years. They haven't picked them up. They live in our communities. They know Haqqanis are here, right? So that's not just the terrorists who came here under fake IDs and are undercover, right? So to understand just how many are in our country is really scary. And yes, we're starting to close the border, but we now need to go back and re-vet everybody we went in the last 4 years. And I've heard no discussions about that happening yet, but like that needs to happen. And
Revet who? Revet who we gave passports and visas to?
Yeah.
Or revet everybody that crossed the border?
And cross the border, especially.
I think we're kind of doing that. Isn't Tom Homeland doing that right now? It was
14 million people. So we're not doing it.
You know what everybody dreads? The inbox. I've gone through thousands and thousands of emails, and I hear you loud and clear. So we're making it official. The Vigilance Elite store is fully stocked. We're dropping new gear more often. Some limited edition, some permanent staples. We've got hats, tees, and even Vigilance Elite tumblers. And yes, before you ask, I'm still booze-free. It's been 3.5 years. Relax. It's just water. If you were one of those emails, consider this your green light. Head over to ShawnRyanShow.com and stock up.
And what I was saying to an intel agency just a week ago, I said, we need to be running against this threat. Like, this needs to be fast forward. The toughest thing we ever did. We need to basically take almost like it's a crisis, right? And, you know, you take a bunch of people and you throw them at the hurricane to help, right? We need to pull in, I don't care if it's retired people, we need to put 10,000 people re-vetting all these. I'm serious. Like, we're at that point. We let too many people in this country that we don't even know who's here. Like, we're not picking up and deporting fast enough. And Trump says that himself. Like, he understands, right? The magnitude of when you're talking 14 million. But I don't think people are understanding there's a chunk in that that are the terrorists, and we have to go just as fast at the terrorists as we're doing against Venezuelan gangs. Like, this is super important.
Homeland, Border Patrol, ICE, all seem to be very busy to me. So you don't think they're moving fast enough. I mean, how would they move faster? It's only been what?
Well, they're moving fast enough, right, on like Venezuelan gangs, but who's doing the vetting to identify the terrorists? Right? That's not Tom Homan's job. Right? He needs that from the intelligence community. Like, that FBI needs to be stepping up and doing that. DHS needs to be playing a role, right? Like, we need to see, honestly, probably some sort of task force come together to do that.
Let's say the secretary, right, of ICE, Homeland Security, they arrest this, they locate this one individual. Say he's Afghan. And they suspect he's a terrorist. Who did they corroborate that information with? They call the Taliban and say, hey, do you know Mr. Abdullah that is here? And if that person is one of those deep cover Taliban operatives or ISKP operatives, do you think the Taliban will admit to it?
No, they'll say we have no record on him.
Yeah, I think the thing that has to be walked back to, and this is the part that really is contentious, and I think we gotta do something, is that there is such a difference between what the government says the terror problem looks like and what, frankly, members of the global war on terror community say it looks like after having been on the phone for 4 years with these individuals. But what I will tell you is, like, for example, and my only thing that I would just add to what they've said on the intel front is, I have the opportunity to run the seams with these different, on Signal and these different groups and just listen, and that's what I try to do. I try to just listen. I'm not an intel analyst. I'm not a targeter, but I am pretty good at relationships and just listening. And what I am hearing consistently across multiple groups is 1,000. I'm hearing the number 1,000 a lot, and it's coming up in radically different verticals. There's no way, and so that really concerns me a lot. That number is popping up, all of the time, conversationally. And then the other thing that really bothers me is that no one is engaging any elements at all of the resistance just on the intel side. I mean, when they've made clear and overt offerings to help with that and to give a competing perspective, zero. And so that, to corroborate what Sarah's saying in that front, at least, like there is no competing threat picture.
Well, let me ask you this. I mean, did we just lose all the information? I mean, we used to have the hide cameras, that would scan the retina, and then there would be, why are you laughing?
Well, we left the hide behind, so Taliban has the hide systems.
Do we still have access to that system at all?
We have the old data of the system, so we have access. So we do
have something to bounce it off of.
Well, some files were lost from it. We have some, but we don't have the full set. I don't want to say what's missing because I don't want the Taliban to know, but we don't have 100%.
But there are new terrorists emerging, Shawn.
I'm not saying that. I'm just saying, do we have any database to bounce when they pick somebody up? Do we have any data to bounce that off of?
Yes, but it's not complete. Even dated isn't complete.
Here's another problem we have this terrorism problem, the ones that are already in the United States and the ones that the administration is arresting and deporting right now. We have that. At the same time, no one is discussing the fact that there are new ones coming to Europe, to America. I mean, Sirajuddin Haqqani, he needs no introduction. He's the wanted terrorist. He's the man issuing passports, Afghan passports, and travel documents. 7 million Afghan passports were printed in Europe after 2021 and shipped to Afghanistan.
7 million.
7 million with the permission granted by the United States State Department. We are still they're probably going to print 1 million more passports this year, more than 1 million. The permission to whether print or not comes from the United States State Department. They're granting permissions. We all know where the passports go, to Sirajuddin Haqqani, because Afghanistan cannot produce its own passport booklets, just like it cannot produce its own currency.
This was the father of suicide bombing in Afghanistan.
Yes, killed over 1,000 American service members in Afghanistan. He's still wanted by the FBI and the State Department. In fact, I don't think the State Department, because Ambassador Karen Decker was recently on a episode Afghan news show, Amu TV. My friend Sami Mahdi, he asked her, he said, is Sirajuddin Haqqani still a terrorist? Is the State Department still looking for him? She says she cannot answer these questions. She refuses to call Haqqani a wanted terrorist.
Wow.
And the worst part is, right, they're issuing these passports to terrorists, and that's not just words. I have seen Algerians' faces on Afghan passports. I've obviously seen Libyan faces on Afghan passports.
Iranians.
Syrian faces on Afghan passports. We're also not treating these passports as compromised, which is insane, right? So they don't even act like the Afghan passports compromised, even though any terrorist can travel to Afghanistan and get their name changed and their face put on one of these passports. So we don't just have a problem with USID. We don't just have a problem with State Department. We have a problem with the money the Department of Defense is giving to the Taliban. We have a problem with money CIA is giving to the Taliban. And we have to be honest about all these pockets of money, because you can't stop them if you don't discuss all of them.
As we say, Shawn, this has to be an act of Congress. This has to be No Tax Dollars for Terrorists Act, which I once again call on His Excellency Speaker Mike Johnson to put it up for a vote. Let members vote on it. This needs to stop.
Okay.
Now, when we take it a step further, like I told you, some of the humanitarian dollars goes to these foreign fighters, but the counterterrorism dollars come in as U.S. cash, and they go all over the place. And we've discussed it before, but they go into a number of these plots, to include the Homeland plot, and then they do shady stuff like Legend said. They bring it through the ZZ Bank, and there's a lot of money laundering to support the plot in the United States. But the money also goes to other plots against Americans, just not in the United States. So some of them they have multiple embassy plots that we've talked about previously. So they'll take physical US dollars cash from Afghanistan, bring it to Africa. So they're funding 2 plots right now with US dollars against US embassies in Africa. It's against our US embassy in Bamako and Mali. And then the biggest concern right now is some plotting against the US embassy and our personnel in Mogadishu, Somalia, because that's one of the next pushes of the Caliphate plan, is to push the US government out of Somalia, and Somalia fall to Al-Shabaab or ISIS, but it's really part of Al-Qaeda's Caliphate plan, just like Syria was. So we are actually funding, with these dollars we send to fight ISIS, plots against us in Africa, of all places, besides here in the homeland. I mean, it's insane that we're funding these incidents that are going to kill Americans, because think of how that's going to come back, right? We have some Americans die, let's say in Mogadishu, we have a bombing go off in Virginia, and then when you track the money down, the money came from the US government. But think of how Americans are going to handle this. And that's what the terrorists want. They want you to blame your government. And that's why Congress needs to act immediately, because they're complicit. Every day they allow it, they're going to be complicit.